Mother Madeleine is a unique personage to whom the Sathya Sai Organisation of New Zealand owes much. She has brought her deep knowledge of Eastern and Western spirituality and her personal magnetism and eagerness to form the basis of her lifelong contributions to the Sai Organisation. She found a living inspiration in Swami's teachings around the late 1970s and has spent her entire life since then taking Swami's teachings to the people of New Zealand through her wide contacts locally and abroad and through her special the Sai Newsletter. Through her long years of service as secretary to the organization, it was her hand propelled by divine grace that rocketed the cradle of the Sai Organisation in its formative years and formed its doors to the spiritual minded of all culture and religions. Along with Richard and other like-minded persons, she gave the organization a Sai perspective aligned to the spiritual echoes of New Zealand. Her pleasant manners, ability to understand with people, and her deep understanding of human nature made her a vibrant ambassador of Sai Organisation's mission of embracing all peoples of New Zealand in its fold. Her outstanding organizational ability was amply demonstrated in the efficient manner she helped both Richard and Douglas in setting the program contents and logistic aspects of the national meetings, workshops and conferences and conducting them meaningfully. She was always available to share her knowledge with others and encourage them. She was all love but could be firm when necessary. Her prayer to Swami to do his work has been amply rewarded by her still continuing at the ripe old age of 95 to do Swami's work. Through Swami's grace, she has learned the inner teachings in a direct and pragmatic manner. She is a person whose continued guidance we need today more than ever.
Madeleine, thanks for giving us the opportunity to do the interview with you. Mm-hmm. Before I go into the official questions about Sai activities, I'd like to know something about your background. Where you're from, which school did you go to?
Yes. Well, I was born in Paris.
What year was that?
What year? Let me see, 1920.
Oh, long years ago.
Oh, yes. I'm now 95.
Wow.
And a bit. And from Paris, we moved to London, but only for a brief while. And then I was with my grandmother in France. My mother joined us, but not until I was 8.
All right. That's in Paris.
Yes. No, by then I think I was in the south of France then. I can't quite remember the exact place where it was. And her marriage had come to pieces anyway. Mm-hmm. And she joined us and we went to a place behind Cannes, where I actually spent an awful lot of my childhood.
Did you go to school there and things like that?
I never went to school.
Okay.
Mother joined something called the PNEU, Parents National Educational Union, I think it was, which had had been born for children living in India.
Oh, interesting.
But as we were moving around, she thought that would be our best move. And she wanted me to be educated to a certain extent in English and not only in French.
Uh-huh.
I think that gives you a vague idea.
And after that,
I went on living partly in the south of France and partly in Switzerland, or at least round the Lake of Geneva, which was sometimes French, sometimes Swiss. Remained. I didn't really leave that for good until I was about 15, when we went to England. My grandmother had quite a lot of money, which she had got from her father, and well, you know, money comes and goes.
Of course.
And as it was looked after in England, it was making it very difficult to be in France.
So where about in England was it?
My grandfather looked after it in London.
London. Okay. Yeah. Was it a small town, was it?
Somewhere behind Singapore.
Singapore?
Yes.
Now hang on, we're jumping from London to Singapore.
Well, he was looking after the headquarters of the thing there, but the work was to do with rubber, which was being grown in Singapore.
Rubber plantation, yes.
I think that vaguely explains it. And so anyway, we went to live in England then when I was 15. Mother had gone over already and had found a house which she rented. It was called Marshborough House. This is quite a big house. My grandmother, yes, my grandmother, she liked to be very comfortable, and she liked to arrange everything. And so she saw to it that an awful lot of things were rearranged in the house, which after all wasn't ours. We only rented it. So all that was quite complicated. And it steadily got rid of what was pretty well what was left of the money. But anyway, I was quite happy there.
How long did you stay there?
I stayed in Marshborough House until after I was married. By then, I think about 4 years after I was married. So it must have been, I was married in 1920. I suppose we left there probably in 1924 or something, by which time we got a house of our own. My first child was born in 1921.
That was still in England?
Yes, it was definitely. And we remained we moved from that house, which was not ours, to a house which was ours, because my father said that the money that had been put on of the mother's use could actually be, the capital could be used. And as mother was living with us anyway, that we decided that that was the best thing to do. So we were able to buy a house in Kent. And after that, we lived there until we came out to New Zealand.
Okay, so Madeleine, so you were married in 1948. Can you tell me more about your wedding life, your husband?
Well, It's never very straight. I was working on the land, and I had low glass coverage for the things that I was growing, and I was working there on my own, and I needed some help, and I first had a girl who was actually very useful, though she was a little funny in the top story.
Oh, yeah.
And then I had a little French boy who drove me bananas. And then my husband had come over. He wasn't my husband yet,
Yes, yes.
but he had come over to London because his sister had been working in London all through the war. She was helping to run a French paper which told what people were doing in England.
In England, oh, I see.
And so he came and joined her. But we also had contacted people who knew her, and she, yes, all those crickets, and she was able to tell Paul that she knew of people who lived in the country. He was finding, you see, because people were short of work when they came back from the forces, they were not allowing people to employ foreigners. But Paul needed some money. So she told him that she knew of some people who were growing things in Kent, and that they would probably be very glad to have him. And so that's how we first met. He came down to see us, and Mother and I and him, we just got on like a house on fire. And he straightway came down and worked for us. And then the problem was that he fell in love with me. And that was fine as far as I was concerned, but it was not fine as far as he was concerned, because actually he was 20 years older than I was.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
It's never made any difference to us. And luckily Mother did persuade him that in fact it wouldn't have worried me, which of course it didn't. And so we were married, I suppose about 4 or 5 months after we first met.
Okay.
We didn't waste any time. And
so when you got married and when you had your first child, was it within a year or?
Yes, within a year.
Yes.
And that was Henry.
Can you recall all your name of all your children now?
Yes, I can.
So first one was Henry?
Yes. The second one was, well, yes, my second one was Bernard. But when I first had Henry, because I had been working on the land all through the war, it's not always very good for one's inside, you know. And so I had a miscarriage after, and the doctor said that he didn't think I'd have any more children. And I didn't want Henry to be an only child, so I adopted a boy whose name was also Paul, like my husband, so he was called Baby Paul, and usually called Bapu. So I had Henry and Bapu, and then Teresa was born.
Teresa, okay.
And yes, she was about 4 when Bernard was born. Bernard was born just after we moved into our permanent house, which you've got details of that in there. Then, after Simon, Emily, and then Christopher, and then Bruno. All born in Kent.
Kent, okay.
Yes. Most of them at home, some of them in hospital. In the Canterbury Hospital.
Tell us something about your husband, Paul. What was he like?
He was the most wonderful man I've ever come across. I had a preview, funnily enough, once, which showed me that I had known him in previous lives. We were very, very close. Our life wasn't easy. We were very busy, working on the land. That was how we got what little money we had. And my mother was always with us, which wasn't very easy either. And I have never met another man like him.
So he died what year?
Yes.
1975.
Yes. It was strange, actually. We had built a little house beside our house because my sister-in-law was going to come out, and Mother had gone over to that to do something or other, and she had fallen down the steps.
Oh.
And she called for Paul, and Paul came to pick her up, but of course Mother, she ate a lot, and she was quite heavy, and the struggle of lifting her was a lot, and the doctor put him to bed, and I was away at the time because I was with the children up at the batch with the youngsters, getting them out of the way because it was holidays, you know. And so I came back at once, and then they started school, and I brought them to school, and Paul was in bed, and Paul said, I'm much better now, I'll take him to school this morning. Well, luckily, I came in, and when it was time to take him to school, and he had fallen asleep. So I thought, good, he should stay nice and quiet there, and I'll take him to school. When I came back, I realized he was dead.
Why you came to New Zealand?
Well, my husband's sister had been to New Zealand to go and see some people.
Oh, yes.
And she said it was a very nice place. But that wouldn't have shifted us, except that things were very dicey in England at the time. I don't think one realizes that. But my husband, who was French, had lived through the occupation in France, and it seemed very much as if England might be occupied by Germany.
Oh, I see.
Time.
Okay.
And he didn't want that for his children. We had quite a lot of them. We had yes, we had 8 children.
Oh, right.
He didn't want what he had gone through in France
I see.
to
Okay.
be what they were.
So that was one of the reasons to come to New Zealand.
Which is why we decided to, when Guy, my sister-in-law, spoke about New Zealand, he thought that would be a darn good place to move to.
Okay, that's good to know your background. Now I would like to begin by asking you about your spiritual background. What were your spiritual understanding before you came in contact with Sai Baba?
I was a part of what is called the School of Philosophy out here.
In Auckland?
In Auckland.
Yes.
And it had a very overall understanding of things. But there was a lot of things that I didn't quite agree with. And I suppose I must explain also, sort of going back a bit, that during the war, I joined the Catholic Church. My mother and grandmother, which is where those with whom I lived, didn't really consider God very much. He was a background that I didn't bother about. Whereas, in point of fact, I had always been interested in God. And so, during, as I say, I joined the Catholic Church during the war. I suppose you've read a bit about the war. It's a long time ago now. But when our troops were caught in Flanders, really, and needed to get back to England to get away from the Germans, there wasn't really enough big ships to get them over. So an extraordinary thing happened. They made an announcement asking all the little ships that worked in the rivers in England to come to a certain place out in the sea where some big battleships were. And these battleships spoke to them and said, we need your ships. If you don't feel that you want to come yourself, that's fine, we can put other people in it. But we need your ships to help bring our soldiers back from Flanders. Actually, all of the people came with their ships. An awful lot of them got sunk, but in fact, they did an incredible job bringing our men back to England.
So they were?
Yes, English people are mainly sort of Christian.
Yeah.
But what I found is that these ships, you see, at that time of the year, usually there is a lot of storms.
Mm-hmm.
For one whole week, we had an absolutely calm sea.
Okay, that's good.
Which was incredible.
Mm.
And I felt, well, I sort of knew inside myself, God did that.
All right.
And that is why I joined the church. I think that vaguely explains.
Right. So when you came to New Zealand, did you used to go to any church in here, or was it in Mount Eden?
Yes,
or?
I joined the Catholic Church here. But I was already feeling that the Catholic Church wasn't giving me all the answers that I wanted. I've always had an inquiring mind, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Yeah. And that is why I also joined the School of Philosophy. And in time, it taught me a great deal, and it was very interesting. But in time, I felt that that wasn't giving me everything.
So you keep on moving forward, yes?
Yeah. And somebody had said that they thought that there was an incarnation of God alive already at that time. And I remember working in the garden and begging God to, if there was somebody, could I hear about it? And of course, God's always marvelous. And it wasn't more than about a fortnight later that I was given a book which spoke about Swami in Prasanthi. But I found the book in Goody's bookshop.
Okay.
And when I read it, I thought, oh, this is really interesting. So I went back to Goody's bookshop. I had seen that there were things about Baba, but I thought, Baba who? Baba what? And I went back there, and of course I bought all the books of Baba that I could.
From the bookshop?
From the bookshop.
Is the bookshop still there?
No, it's not, actually. Okay. It was called Goody's bookshop, and I think it's not alive now.
Okay, so what happens if you read so many books and then?
Well, I read them and I said, now this is the truth. It was quite obvious. And I said, well, now, where can I find him? Luckily, one of my sons, Bernard, had seen something about him.
Yeah.
And wanted to
carry on. Yeah.
Yes, he hadn't done anything about it himself, but he was able to tell me that some people, yes, that if I went to Goody's bookshop, I would probably find the address of some people who followed Sai Baba. And so that's how I joined up with it.
So you used to go there every Thursday to that center?
I went there. And they were running what little there was to run of Sai Baba at that time. And I started going there regularly.
So what was the activities taking place in the center?
They mainly ran something every Thursday.
Were they singing bhajans?
Yes,
oh, yes.
bhajans. They were mostly, bhajans were mostly on tape.
Okay.
But they did sing them as much as they could. But you must realize that when we were there, and we were all there wasn't more than about 19 to 20 people.
That's a good number.
It's a good number.
Yes.
But when one thinks of the huge number nowadays.
Yeah, of course, yes.
And so I started going there regularly.
So what was your activity? What were you involved in? Were you writing any?
Well, I very shortly got very involved because the people that were running it, she wasn't well. She'd had a miscarriage. She wasn't well. And so her husband was doing it, but he also had a job. And so little by little, most of the work landed on me.
All right.
Well, I became secretary.
Oh, yes.
I put together the monthly newsletter.
Can you recall any bhajans? Were you singing bhajans at that time?
Yes, we were singing bhajans.
Okay, so you were secretary and doing the newsletters. Yes. So tell us about your first visit to see Sai Baba. Have you? Did you go to Prasanthi Nilayam? Did you go to India?
Oh yes,
yes.
Very quickly.
All right. So tell us your first visit to Sai Baba.
Yes.
What happened at that meeting?
Well, I think I went there just after. Yes, I had Baba's birthday here, and then went straight there to.
How many people went from New Zealand? You went
we
in a group.
A party of about 20.
20. So who can you recall anyone came with you? So how many times have you been to Prasanthi?
7 times.
7 times. What was the last?
The last time would have been in 1985, probably.
That's about right, huh? Yes, 85. Yeah.
Yeah. And except for the first time, well, Phil actually was supposed to be running the group, except that he disappeared. He disappeared because he wanted to learn Sanskrit and things.
Oh, so did you study Sanskrit?
I have studied Sanskrit. I can manage it to a certain extent.
Oh, yes.
But not very much. I don't manage it as well as I can manage Latin. But
so have you read Mahabharata or Bhagavad Gita?
I have read all 12 volumes of Mahabharata. But I did read them in English, not in.
Of course, yes. So what is about Sai Baba's teachings that appeals you most?
Everything he said was dead right. Whereas everything that I'd been learning was partially right. And there's a big difference between the two.
Of course.
I found that I had found the God which I had always sort of believed in, but I realized that even Baba is only a personification of the God. The God is beyond him.
Of course.
I think that answers your question.
Okay. So what is the greatest manifestation or miracle you have witnessed, Sai Baba?
He did give me manifestations. He materialized some vibhuti. He also materialized a ring for my son. But it was more what he was teaching which was interesting.
Well, interesting. Yeah.
More than materialization, yes, of course you've got to realize that he can do extraordinary things, but it wasn't that.
So Baba has talked about the golden age that has to come or has already been here.
And I think the golden age has started,
but
it is not in full, it'll be much fuller very shortly.
So what do you think of Prema Sai Baba? What will be his activities when he comes on earth?
Yes. I think it'll probably by then be a lot more understood by people.
Understood in terms of how to live lovingly.
Well, you see, the problem at the present moment is that there is an enormous number of Indians in this country who follow Sai Baba. But there is not a large number of non-Indians.
Quite true, yes.
And of course, the same sort of thing happened at the time of Christ years ago, but in due course. And that will happen, but what will make it happen, I am not sure. But I suppose as time goes on.
So what is your feeling about the future of the planet?
Baba says it'll go on living, and I believe that. I think we were going to suffer a great deal, and we are already doing so, because of all the muck we're chucking up into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it won't be easy, but it'll probably settle down again, because in point of fact, who do you think is in charge? Baba. So it will sort out.
So. After having experienced and met many of the Sai devotees in New Zealand, what would be your recommendation of how the Sai centers in New Zealand should be run? In terms of universal altar setting and universal songs, Maori songs, things like that.
I think there has to be a lot more songs in the local language. It's all very well having them in Sanskrit, and to a certain extent, that is marvelous, because you can have them in any country. But people don't give themselves the trouble to find out what they mean.
The meaning has to go with it, yes.
Yeah. So, unless one can sing in one's own language, it doesn't sort of mean the same.
But how about in terms of the activities that are taking place by the centers and doing the services? Have you any views on that? What sort of services they should be doing?
The camps are extremely useful. There used to be more of them, and I think that we are not producing enough of them now. It all has to move ahead slowly. Does that more or less answer?
Yeah, so they're doing medical camps in...
that is extremely useful, yes.
Okay. So what do you think of the youth nowadays in Sai youth? Are they getting involved?
They are getting involved a great deal more, and that is very good.
Okay.
And I'm glad to see that they're being allowed to be in more important places. So therefore they can do more.
Do more things, yes, yes.
It'll be the youth who will slowly bring it through.
Oh, it's good to know that. So you have been involved with the Central Council for many years, especially in the Sai Newsletter. Can you tell how it all began, the organization in New Zealand?
Yes. Some people sort of started it, and they were part of Goodie's bookshop. They had been there, and then Martha Betty went over, and she did a great deal, sort of interesting people in it, and various other people. But you know, in the long run, Baba takes this person and that person, and so you do a little bit.
Yes. So your involvement was the newsletter, secretary, any other things you were doing?
Well, yes, I was helping to run the camps. I was, you know, it was rather like how Kasturi was working in India.
Yeah.
Most things were landing on me, just as most things were landing on Kasturi once upon a time.
Yeah, I can recall you came to Hamilton and you were doing workshop on study circles.
Oh, the study circle. Yes. That slowly came together.
Yeah.
It was very difficult to keep it going.
So what was the difficulties?
Well, people sort of felt they knew all about it, so they weren't going to bother, you see. But they did not know all about it.
Yeah.
I kept on with them right through. And slowly they grew, and sometimes they didn't.
I remember you were involved in producing booklets on how to run study circles and some guidelines.
Yes, I've been producing some booklets.
Yes.
I've got them, I think, in
the library.
In my library, yes. Funnily enough, when I was barely 3, they'd been reading some books to me, and I had said, I'm going to write one day.
Right.
And then I thought to myself, what am I going to write about? And all through my life, I never found that there was anything that I really wanted to write about until I reached Sai Baba.
Right.
And then, of course, I did.
You've written, I've read some of your books. It was fantastic. You were also involved in when they're running the conference, so you were helping.
Yes.
I've been the programs.
Involved in well, at one time, practically all the conferences, and then it sort of other people took. I haven't been back to India for conferences since. It was an extraordinary experience once. I was standing in front of the mandir, which was all lit up. And I looked up. It was dark already, but it had been light. And up in the sky, I saw things which looked like angels moving around in the sky. They weren't birds. And I know that I and several other people were standing there looking at them for a long time. It was very beautiful.
That was a good experience that you had.
Yes.
Just to round up now, so if you had to sum up Swami's message, what would it would be?
It had a different angle for everyone that he spoke to. I have, as it happened, when I first heard of Swami, I had already been studying a great many different books and writing comments on them. So when I heard of Swami, everything important that he said, I immediately wrote. And I have a huge, and I really mean huge, database of all that he said. And it varies so much from person to person.
So you wrote a book on question and answers. So that most of the answers came from the database.
Yes, it would have been questions and answers. It would also from his talks and so on. And I can show you the thing on the computer.
Tell us about this. I understand that you're writing 2 new books. Can you explain more about that?
There's a compilation of Swami's discourses, the one that I've sort of chosen, the ones that I felt would be the most interesting. But it also contains everything that I was able to get hold of what Swami spoke about Krishna, Rama, and so on.
Oh, right. How your children got involved in Sai Baba?
Yes. My daughter got involved, my eldest daughter. Bernard is still involved. Emily and Barry are very involved. In fact, Barry is at the moment the head of the School of Philosophy in
New Zealand.
Yes, it was Auckland. And he also goes to various other places. Emily is actually quite involved with Sai Baba, but keeps it a little quiet. So, there's some and some.
That's good. The whole family is involved.
Yes. I only had 2 interviews with him.
Do you want to share that?
There wasn't very much. One of them, I spoke to him about, I had been asked to see if he would look after some people. And I spoke to him about that. And what he answered to me was dead right, but I wouldn't like to mention it in case the people involved with them heard about it. And he looked at me and he said, "How are you?" Well, you see, lots of the people, when they go to Sai Baba, as you probably know, want to ask him to do all sorts of various things. And so he said to me, "What do you want?" And I only answered, "I want to serve you." And then he looked at me and he said, "How is your health?" And I wasn't interested in it, so I said, "Fine, thank you, Baba." And he looked at me and he says, "No, it's not." He said, "You're not hearing very well." I said, yes, that's true. I also said, thank you, Baba. I don't quite know why, but it was right, because in point of fact, he saw to it that I did hear after that perfectly well. Thank you very much.
Yes. So you're still doing a lot of service even now. You're writing those 2 new books.
Yes.
So really into it. That's good to know that.
Yes. All I wanted to do was serve him.
Yeah, the newsletter is still going on. It's in the internet. And that's a monthly newsletter. You're still doing it. You started it many years ago. It's great to see that energy is still there.
Yes.
Yes.
The energy is still there. I still write the newsletter.
Yes, yes.
As you probably know. And I do everything I can. But of course, quite obviously, I no longer run things. I'm too old. And thank God other people do.
Right. Not from your, I mean, you have been a fantastic role model for other office bearers to carry on what you've been doing. Yes, yes.
Oh, yes. Plenty of good people are able to carry on now. And I'm very grateful for that. Because I'm old.
95?
Yes.
Yes.
That I could sum up Baba's message, because in point of fact, it varied a bit from person to person. And if you want to get a full view, and even then you won't do it.
Okay, Madeleine, thank you very much for giving your time to have this interview.